Hello and welcome to another edition of Turned Out a Punk. I'm your host, Damian Abraham, and once again, I'm bringing you a conversation with someone who grew up listening to punk, may or may not still be involved with punk, but had their life changed by the genre in a major way. And today on the show, man, someone who's lived this life for their whole life. You may know him from the band The Stimulators. You may know him from Murphy's Law. You may know him from the Cro-Mags. You may even know him from Cattle Press. On the show today, the one, the only, Harley Flanagan. And this is one hell of an episode. Get ready. More on that in 1 second. But first, if you want to get in touch with me, head over to the email address turnedoutapunkpodcast@gmail.com. That is run by my brother and show producer and guest booker extraordinaire, Tristan Abraham, and he will get the message to me. You can find me on Instagram at Left for Damien. And there is also a YouTube page, a TikTok page, an Instagram page, and a Facebook page, all for this podcast. All those can be found at Turned Out a Punk on those platforms. To support the show, tell all your friends about it. Let them all know that you enjoy this podcast that we do here each and every week. Yeah, sometimes twice a week. But generally, right now, it's each and every week. And that is that. I play in a band. We are called Fucked Up. We have got a brand new 7-inch coming out on the venerable Sub Pop Records. It is called Disabuse. It's like a meta tribute to Poison Idea. And anyway, you can order that at subpop.com or you can find it at fuckedup.cc, which is our band's website. And we're playing a show in Yellowknife coming up in March. And that's it. So if you're in Yellowknife, come hang out. All right, that is that. On to today's show. As I said off the top, we got a legend on the show, someone who has been involved in punk rock since he was like 10 years old, Harley Flanagan. Harley is someone who I think anyone who's paid close attention to his life has been on one hell of a journey. And I think in certainly the last few years, he's, I don't want to put words into his mouth. You can hear him kind of talk about the experience a little bit more on this podcast, but I think he's the first guy to admit that at different points in his life, because of obviously the situation he came out of, he was not always the nicest person. And so to see him happy and content, and to be honest with you, I had no idea what was going to happen when we sat down for this interview, but this is one of my favorite ones I've ever gotten to do. This was such a great conversation. And you can catch Harley at the end of March on tour with Danzig. He's going to be going on the West Coast for some shows, and there's lots going on always with the Cro-Mags. You can find out more information about them over on Harley's website. Also over on that website, you will find out information about this. I got to see this thing, this unbelievably incredible documentary, and that's with me not even seeing it yet, about Harley Flanagan called Wired for Chaos. It is premiered at New York Doc and to rave reviews, and this thing has been something that I think a lot of people have wanted to see. They're going to be doing more screening dates, so keep your eyes peeled for screenings near you. You can find out more information, as I said, though, at wiredforchaos.com, where they've got, trailers and whatnot. So that is that. All right. I think the only note I have to get to is I mistakenly identify Ed Saunders' book as Garbage Can People, and it is not called that at all. It's called The Family, and it's about Charles Manson. But that'll make sense when you get to that part of the episode. I think that's it. All right. Get ready. Sit back, relax, and enjoy Harley Flanagan on Turned Out a Punk. Harley, thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's my pleasure, brother.
Well, as I was just telling you off air, I feel like this whole podcast history has been in training for this interview that I'm about to do with you.
Well, I hope I don't let you guys down.
Well, I think to understand your career in music, you kind of need to be a real nerd about punk history, because not only are you it's very storied, the first New York hardcore band kind of era and all that kind of stuff, Stimulators, but I want to talk about Harley, the Danish punk years, which I guess is the start of your journey. Harley, how'd you get into punk? Do you remember the first time you ever came across the word?
Well, I actually have to give the credit to my mother, because she was in London and she went into a record store. My mother was always really into music. My aunt, my whole family is very, very musically inclined. They all play music and have always listened, and music was always a big part of my family. Listening, playing it, you know. And anyway, she went into a record store and she asked the guy, "What are the kids listening to now? What's current? What's the newest thing? What's like, you know, basically what's jumping on the underground?" You know, like she was always really up on everything, you know. And she picked up some records for me. She wanted to turn me on to what was going on with the kids in London at the time. She knew that would be the next thing, you know. And she came home with Nevermind the Bollocks, the Dead Boys' first album, the Clash's first album, and a stack of singles that include also the Damned's first album. Did I say that? So, and then also a stack of singles, mostly from Stiff Records, like some Damned singles, as well as Ian Dury, Nick Lowe, Reckless Eric, and I don't even remember. Oh, yeah, Albertos Elos Trios Paranoias. Like
That's the
that
one I
was,
wanted to ask you about because I've heard you talk about the Stiff singles, and I've never heard you go through the list.
oh yeah, yeah,
And it's like I love all those early Stiff singles, but it's not
right.
all punk.
No, well, the thing is, you know, at that particular time, it was also new. So a lot of things were getting, you know, a lot of things were falling under that umbrella. You know, I mean, at that point, uh, anything new and different kind of was looked at as punk. You know, it took a little while for things to kind of split, and all of a sudden, this was new wave, and this was punk, and you know, I mean, you know, you listen to this stuff back then, and it was there was a lot of variety. There wasn't really a textbook formula for what punk was yet. You know, I still listen to a lot of the old stuff. I mean, I was just listening to Generation X's first album the other day, and like, you know, I was really just like, damn, man, the musicianship on this is fucking, it's awesome. It's, you know, it wasn't until a little later that punk bands started to get less musical, or you know, because you got to remember that first generation of punk bands were people who just grew up on music. They didn't have any other punk to pull their resources or their inspiration from. So they were all listening to whatever had been happening before, whether it was, you know, fucking T Rex or whatever the fuck, you know.
But your mom was deeply connected to, and rest in peace, of course, but to proto-punk stuff, right? Like obviously the
Oh
Velvet
yeah.
Underground.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. My mom was, you know, part of that whole the factory scene. You know, I mean, in fact, ironically, she was the reason that Andy Warhol went to go see the Velvet Underground for the first time. So, I mean, she, you know, my mom had such a, she was a very important character who didn't actually, sadly, didn't get to contribute that much herself, even though she had a lot of potential to. You know, she was very, she was a really good writer. She had a lot of talent that just never really got explored. You know, but she was around so much fucking crazy shit. You know, thus my life started off the way it did.
And it starts off really young for her too, right? Because she does that
Yeah.
Warhol screen test at like
Oh
15.
yeah. 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 Now she, yeah, man. She had a fucking crazy life, man. You know, her life is probably, I would say, as interesting, if not more interesting than mine. You know, I mean, I could tell you fucking crazy stories about her. You know, she's, you know, I mean, she saw the Beatles at Shea Stadium. She actually fucking mugged some other teenage girl for her ticket. I was like, really, mom? Like, you're a hippie piece of love ass fucking jacked some chick up for her ticket? That's fucked up. Like, you know, like, you know, but at the end of the day, she was a hard ass little, you know, New York fucking chick, you know.
It's like the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Nah, man. And then, my dad being the fuck up that he was as well. So it's really like miraculous that, the chemicals that made me, it's miraculous that I'm still here to tell the tale.
But I think like once again, like through your life, you kind of tell the history of punk and even the proto punk history too, right? Like it's in your DNA.
Yeah, for better or for worse, but I'm like a living dinosaur or some shit. You know, it's funny because like we were just on tour, I guess a couple months ago, uh, like December, whatever, and we did a show in Boston, and Cheetah Chrome was playing next door. The Dead Boys, his lineup that he has, was playing next door, and I went and I saw him, and we were hanging out. And my guitarist Dominic, he was just like in the room watching, and I swear to God, it was like he saw like us both tear up, like just hugging each other and just like you know that's really the generation that I was a part of more so than anything. I really grew up in that, and the difference is that I was like 12, and these people were all like in their 20s and so on. So like, and and what really hit me hard that night was like, first of all, it was great hearing those songs, you know, live. But what really, really hit hard for me was that like those guys were such fucking total fuck ups. Like, just like the debauchery was on such a filthy level, like just all of it, everything back then. And those guys were like champions of that, you know. And so it's like on one hand, it's kind of like I got a lot of love for this guy, but I also feel like, damn, it's kind of like having abusive family that you love and still not being able to really come to terms with the type of shit that they did. Not that the Dead Boys ever did anything to me, but just like growing up in an environment where all the adults are literally like, or not all, but not my aunt Denise and so on, but like the majority of the punk rock scene at that point in time when I was a little kid were people who were like, shooting lots of drugs and just like, most of the punk rock couples that I knew were like doing live sex shows on, in Times Square, for their heroin or for their drug money and shit. And a lot of the chicks were prostitutes, and shit was just it was fucking crazy. Like it was really deranged. So it's like I'm looking at this guy and I love this guy, and I'm also like, dude, how the fuck, it's no wonder that my life took so many fucked up turns and twists when like you were like the adults that I was around and looking up to and essentially raising me, just by association and environment. So, it's really no wonder that by the time I was 15, I was already shooting drugs and, of course I had already been like taking acid, whatever, all the things that eventually lead up to shooting up, And so it's like, yeah, man, like I got a lot of love for a lot of these people because they really, they were like my elders, but it's just like, oh fuck, man. Kind of
Yeah,
it hurt
like
a little bit.
yeah. I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, it's cool. That was pretty much my closing on that one. It
Well,
hurt a little bit.
yeah, I can only imagine, like, because I think it's romanticized a lot, and
Oh
obviously
yeah,
your book did a lot to dispel, I think, the romance around the
yeah,
photos.
yeah.
But
Well,
the
the documentary that they just did is gonna fucking really blow your mind if the book did.
well, I think that that's the thing is that this is already your second chapter by the time you arrive in New York because you're part of one of the most interesting punk
Or-
scenes to me is that Danish punk scene. I mean, like third chapter and second chapter in punk. I mean, because that
yeah, 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 yeah. Well, you know what? Well, I don't know how much of that would be interesting to most people, but the one thing that I will say right off the bat is that would be interesting to most people who are into metal, thrash, rock, whatever the fuck you want to call it, is that I opened up for Hank Sherman's old band, Hank Sherman from Merciful Fate. You know,
The
back when he was
Brats.
the Brats. Yes, you've done your research, bro.
Well,
Well,
I
you
think.
read the book.
Oh, believe me, I did a lot of research as well as reading the book. But I think like I'm a huge fan of that Danish punk scene because, like you're, oh yeah, like you're saying, it's not like punk at a
It's
certain.
funny because I was going to wear my Aarhus football jersey.
Well, you would have lost me, but if you wore a Sod shirt, I would have freaked out because the guy from the Sods goes on to they become eventually Svart Soul, and he becomes hugely
Yeah, yeah,
influential
yeah.
in Danish alternative music, right? Like they're
Who the fuck do you know so much about Danish music? That's really, I just got to say, that's a little unusual.
I feel like you spent your life shaping the history of this music. I've spent my life immersed researching the history of this music. So,
Oh, yeah.
um, I,
Yeah, yeah. No, I hear you, man. I hear you. You know,
so
we all have those things that we geek out on. God bless. You know, I've been there.
were you living in Christiania in Denmark
Yeah,
at the time?
yeah, yeah. I did for a while. I mean, I wound up in Aarhus, which is the second biggest city there, but I did spend a good amount of time at Christiania, and I go to Denmark pretty often now. It took me a lot of years to start making the visits back over because my life was such a shit show, and I really didn't have the extra funds and so on and so forth. But now I make a point of ending all my tours or starting them near there so that I can go visit all my people over there. And yeah, I did live in Christiania, and I do typically go and visit there when I'm over. But Aarhus is always my destination.
So when you're getting into this stuff, are there other kids around you at your age that are getting into this stuff? Or are they all older people as well?
You
I
mean
mean,
punk rock?
yeah, punk rock in Denmark at the time.
Not really anybody my age, but you know, the people that I knew who were getting into it were, you know, I guess late teens, early 20s. You know, your typical age of getting into music. I was just a little bit early as far as getting into music because, you know, for one, I had already been going to shows since I was literally even unable to realize what a fucking show was. You know, since I was a baby, I had been at, you know, I was like one of those naked babies running around in front of the stage at like Jefferson Airplane, you know. So, I mean, I don't really remember a time before concerts and nightlife and shit like that. But what the fuck was I even doing with this? But yeah, no, there wasn't any really anybody my age, not in Denmark, and not even when I came when I finally moved to New York for good. You know, you also got to remember, even though I lived in Denmark, I used to come to New York like every year, maybe once. There was like a 2 year space, but I so that's how I was able to, excuse me. That's why I caught things like the Summer of Sam and the Blackout and all that shit. And then I wound up back in Denmark, and then I came back for good in '79, just in time for like a whole shitstorm of other, just like, you know, there was a bunch of other serial killers that were really happening at that time. Just like, it was a real, New York was a real fucking shit show back then, man.
What was it like going from? I guess you're like a little kid, so as much as you can remember, but you're going from like like a
Oh, I
socialist.
remember. I remember well, man. It was fucking different. That's you know. But again, this is all stuff that I get into, that they get into very deeply in the film. You know, I don't want to give away too much, but you know, just picture going from a place where, you know, there really isn't like real poverty like we understand it. You know, like everybody has a home, everybody's, you know, got medical, you know, uh, it's just a different life. It's just more family you know, it's just fucking different, man. You know, they have a lot. It's the feeling I get is they have a lot more respect for like kids and stuff. You know, that's just the feeling I get. Like even when I go back there now and I see how kids are raised and shit, and I'm like, damn, man, that's childhood right there, man. The fuck did I have? Like when I moved back to New York, it was fucking insane. You know, it was really insane. You know,
There's not too many diametrically opposed metropolises than 1970s Copenhagen and
oh
1970s New York.
shit, man, and forget Copenhagen, man, because that's even
Yeah.
a little exciting compared to Aarhus. You know, so, you know. So you know, I mean, I love Aarhus. I go back there as often as I can, but it's, you know, New York was definitely, you know, as intense as it was, you know, I mean, look, I experienced a lot of fucking amazing shit. You know, my life really was like a fucking movie. So the fact that there's a documentary now is kind of cool because the things that I saw through my eyes were just insane. A lot of it was truly horrific, but nonetheless, I mean, my life has really been exciting, you know, to say the least. And I think about that all the time. Like, you know, like this has really been a really interesting journey. You know, when I die, I know I will be able to say that was interesting.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I can tell you that now. You don't need to die for that, Harley. You're interesting, buddy. Trust me. Uh, what do you remember from that anarchist punk festival in
Yeah.
1978?
Well, it was like the first big gathering of punk rockers in Denmark, in Copenhagen. Uh, it was, I believe, it was at Christiania. Yeah, yeah, it was, and it was fucking cool, man. It was a little overwhelming, you know. I mean, I was like 10, but I mean, it wasn't like it was just overwhelming in the fact that I was away from home. I was like Denmark, and it's a small country, but like I traveled from Aarhus to Copenhagen, which is, you know, quite a distance, and I was away from my family. I was with two adults in my band that I didn't really know, two French guys. The whole shit was a little fucking crazy if you think about it. Like, mom, you let your fucking 10-year-old disappear with two fucking guys that you don't know for jack shit. You know, like we barely knew these motherfuckers. Like, we don't, you know, we knew them for like a few months at best. You know, two fucking French guys, and they were, as it turned out, they were real assholes. But you know, so the whole experience was a little overwhelming. You know, my first road trip, you know, a few hours away, spending a few days in a different city without my folks at 10 in a band of 20 whatever year olds. Um, it was fucking, yeah, I mean, that was interesting.
And there's like so much media fervor around punk music at that point, right? Because you're
Mhm.
getting into it as it's kind of happening, where there's,
Mhm.
a palpable fear of it, even pre Sid Vicious stuff. Like there's
Well,
like,
yeah, I mean, the Pistols and all that shit, they hadn't broken up yet.
yeah. Did they make it
But
to Denmark? I know they did Sweden.
I do think they did, but I either I was in England or again I was in fucking Aarhus and they probably played Copenhagen. I
Yeah.
mean, you know, I unfortunately that was like one of the only bands that I did not get to see.
Did you check out stuff when you were going back to New York or when you were in England?
Oh yeah, yeah, fuck yeah. I mean, I went to like the 100 Club, I believe it was when like 70. I want to say 79, but it might have been earlier because I went to London a couple times back then. Rat Scabies had a band for a moment called The Doomed. No, his band was, I'm sorry, The Doomed was when The Damned got back together after the first breakup. In between that period, he had a band called The White Cats. And I remember going to see those guys play. They snuck me in because obviously I was a kid and they had to sneak me in. Me and my mom were there. And uh, that was my first experience with a punk rock show in London. That was, yeah, it was like 70s. It was, I don't know the exact date. You're the fucking nerd. If you look up fucking the White Cats, you can probably even find the show and the date that they played.
Oh,
Um,
oh, believe me, Harley, I'm already planning on doing that as soon as we get off this call. That's my first move.
well, I just out for curiosity to say, send me a message and let me know when it works. I had to like watch the show from like the side of the stage, like behind a curtain, kind of, because they didn't want security to fucking chuck me out. And before they played, it was funny. I was like in the corner, and like they gathered all their friends and like a group around me. So all the adults are all standing around me, drinking, like hiding the kid in the corner.
You're like one of the few people that has the advantage, or not the, or like the historical perspective of three different punk scenes. Like, I imagine they were all kind of really, were they different feeling going to these shows, or is there kind of like a universal vibe at that point?
Well, it was pretty, what do you mean? Like from the different
Yeah,
countries?
like going to shows in Denmark versus going to shows in England at that time, where it's really rowdy, versus New York, which is seems like very adult compared to the other
You
places.
know what? Honestly, from what I see, the most fucking depraved, like the most fucking out to lunch. Denmark was pretty innocent for the most part. I mean, you know, it was a smaller scene, you know, but I mean, yeah, sure, people got high, people fucking drank, partied, whatever. It was, it was punk, man. They were nuts. Most of those people a lot of those people wound up turning into that first wave of, well, Hank Sherman, Merciful Fate. A lot of those people became the first era of battle vest wearing, thrashing metal type, the whatevers, I guess Diamond Head and all that shit kind of ushered in that. You got to remember, all that shit was sort of at the same time, that early shift in I guess you could call that metal and stuff. And fucking Lemmy used to hang out at all the punk shows and hang out with all the punk rockers. I mean, you look at all the old pictures of Lemmy in the fucking late 70s and shit, he's hanging out with punk rockers. You don't see him hanging, besides like Phil Lynott from fucking, Thin
Thin
Lizzy.
Lizzy.
So it's like, he was mostly at punk shows, hanging out with the Damned and the Adverts and fucking all those fucking people, you know?
Yeah, he would even say that he thought of Motorhead as a punk band more than a metal band in some interviews.
You know what? I thought of, yeah, because I mean, what were other metal bands at the time? I mean, I was never really into, Maiden and, all that other shit. I just thought it was a little fake. I just, I, I didn't, I never, in hindsight, knowing what I know about Maiden now, I think they were more fucking street than a lot of the punk rock motherfuckers were. As far as those guys were, soccer fucking hooligans. They were, they were legit. I just was never into all the fucking pretentious fucking doll, the mannequin puppets, whatever, fucking all the big stage, the grandiose fucking horse shit. Like, to me, the biggest thing I wanted to see as far as stage shows, like, when I saw the Clash at the Palladium, like that, it was just like a big stage and a band up there. Fucking, they had a backdrop and lights, a lot of lights, but it was bare. It was raw. It was just, they were just up there fucking killing it, you know?
Yeah, and with the exception of Iron Maiden, if you like look at a bunch of those bands, I guess a lot, not as many of the British bands, but a lot of those metal bands that are kind of kicked off by that same sort of energy as punk rock. A lot of those guys played in punk bands, from
Yes.
like Motley
Yeah.
Crue to like Metal Church to like all these bands had dudes from punk bands in them.
I don't know anybody from the crew or know much about their history. It was never really my scene. I also really don't know much of Metal Church's music. I know my old drummer Petey liked them, and I do believe we played with them a few times. I just, I remember crossing paths. I was never really, as far as metal, my metal was Sabbath and Motorhead, and I like a lot of Priest, but I was, whatever, Slayer, obviously, Obviously some Metallica gets in there. You know, I like metal like that. You know.
Well, Metal Church is ex-members of the Lewd, and Motley Crue.
Oh shit! Yeah. Well, who from the fucking Lewd?
Oh man, now you're testing my knowledge. I can't remember the guy's name. The main guitar player in Metal Church is the. I screwed up. I can't believe I forgot this. Kurt Vanderhoof from Metal Church was the guy in
I know
Lewd.
that name. Okay, I know him. I know
He
him.
he's the guitarist and I think bassist at times in Metal Church. He's like the founding member of the band, kind
Okay.
of thing. Um, but and then Motley Crue features.
I was like, there's no fucking way any of the Lewd were in Metal Church. I would have known that.
It was Kurt Vanderhoof was in Metal Church and the Lewd.
Well, what the fuck did he play in the Lewd? He must have came in after because I didn't. I mean,
he's on the very first 7-inch and the.
He's on American Wino.
Yeah, he's on American Wino and he's on the very first single, "Kill Yourself."
But no, because Bobby played. I'm sorry. Now we're going. People, whoever is listening to this shit, you just have two nerds here now, fucking rambling. This is probably boring to you. I'm sorry, but what? Wait a second. No, because Olga DeVolga was on bass. Fucking Bobby Lewd was on guitar. And the fuck, I cannot remember the singer and the drummer's name, but who the fuck?
Oh, maybe, sorry, I stand corrected. He's just on "Kill Yourself," the first single. There, I apologize. Yes, sorry. Yes,
I'm part nerd myself, man.
But now I'm going to get really nerdy on you. That band features members of the Whiz Kid. The Lewd featured members of this group called the Whiz Kids, which featured the people that would go on to form the Screamers, who were backed up by this band called the Telepaths, who featured Nikki Sixx from Motley Crue.
Jesus. Okay, I thought you were about to say Nikki Sixx from Verbal Abuse. That would have rung some bells for me. But,
that would have been great.
Yeah. No, well, of all those bands that you mentioned, besides Motley Crue, obviously, the only one I'm familiar with is the Screamers.
The Whiz Kids, I don't ever think.
You are a bigger nerd than
me. I feel like I am somewhere in the middle of you and Nardwar. I'm in that gulf somewhere.
I know a little bit about a little bit, you know.
Oh my gosh, you lived a little bit of a lot of it, so
I burned a lot of brain cells along the way. So you know, but I held on to like the stupidest shit and the most important shit. Everything else I forgot.
How familiar were you with Ed Saunders? Because I know he was friends with your mom from the band The Fugs.
Oh yeah. Fucking of course, Ed. I don't even think of his last name. He was I knew him through. Yeah, I actually played with the Fugs. I played drums with them once. Yeah. I didn't know that.
No, I did not.
They did a reunion in like early 80s, or maybe even as far back as 80. And I played drums for them at the Ritz, Webster Hall. And Allen Ginsberg performed, and somehow they roped me the fuck in. But yeah, no, Ed's fucking cool, man. I knew him quite well. I obviously had a different relationship with him than my mom because he's more of her age, but I knew him quite well. I don't really know what he's notorious for. I just knew him as a person and as a friend of the family, you know.
I think the Fugs, to me, are the first sort of New York proto-punk band with the Velvet Underground. Like, they're right there.
They were weird, man. They were definitely weird. I remember thinking they were weird when I was playing with them.
Their lyrics are closer.
Yeah, that was one of the things that stuck out for me. I was like, these guys are really fucking weird. And it was funny too because I didn't know them as being a bunch of weirdos. I just knew them as friends of my family. So that shit was really kind of like, I was like, okay, you know?
Well, this is going to blow your mind. He wrote a book about Manson.
Okay.
And when he wrote the book, it was like still fresh after the Manson family murders. And his book was super deep on that kind of stuff.
Uh-huh.
And he needed security out there. And it was the guys from the Eagles were kind of rolling being his security.
Okay. Interesting. You know, he's a really cool guy. I got to ask him. Fuck, man. I got to reach out to that motherfucker. I mean, I'm still in touch with some of the people, believe it or not, from that era, only because Well, again, I keep going back to this documentary they did. We wound up speaking to a lot of people from my, not just my past, but my mom and my family's past, and like people who lived in that building on 12th Street where Allen Ginsberg lived, who he obviously worked with, and that's how I know him. And whatever, man. Point is I'm still in touch with some of those fucking people, man.
Did you ever hear his punk band, the Glue-Ons?
No, I did not. That was probably, I'm assuming, late 70s.
He did, no, I think early 80s. It's after he moved to Denver.
Oh, well, that's why I didn't
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
He has a punk LP where it's half
Yeah.
poetry and then half punk songs.
Really?
Yeah.
That's weird because he wasn't really a punk. I guess he just must have been inspired by punk music when he was around me and my friends and everything else, because that wasn't his thing.
Well, that's why I was wondering if you were his gateway to kind of finding out about this stuff.
Well,
And
but the Stimulators probably were, and more so than just me. But like, I obviously, you know, kept going way after that fell apart, and I still, knew all those people. I didn't see them as frequently, but that neighborhood was fairly small, even though it's a big city. So you would, you know, cross paths with people.
was Burroughs still going to punk shows around that time too? Because I know he went to some of those early CB shows. They talk about him in Please Kill Me.
You know what? I only encountered him one time, and it was at my mom's at our apartment. I don't really know him, and I just, you know, I knew his face. I didn't even know his fucking name. It was just like I walked in the house, and I was just like, "Oh, there's that dude," And then I went and did whatever the fuck I did. You know, there was so many quote unquote, I don't know, interesting people or influential writers and so on around my mom, and or I should say, we were around so many influential writers, poets, artists, and so on. That I just never really paid much attention. I was too young. I didn't give a fuck. These were like friends of my mom's and people that she looked up to. I didn't really care. It was, do you give a fuck about the people that your parents are hanging out with? Not really.
Occasionally, my dad hangs out with. My dad used to work at Track Records in the and do stuff for like the Who and stuff. So
Oh, well,
occasionally,
that would be interesting. Yeah,
but but
you
but
know.
but like only when only as an adult now that I'm like, oh my god, that guy did
Well, that's what
what?
I'm saying. A lot of shit goes over your head.
Yeah.
Because you're literally, you're a child. So
And this might be something you don't want to talk about, but later in life, Ginsberg certainly aligned himself with some groups that had some pretty.
yeah, I've spoken to people very close to him about all that shit over the years, and I can only say I never experienced anything fucking weird around him or with him. I and it pretty fucking much grosses me the fuck out that some of these people that he would align himself with, and I never actually myself ever saw Alan do anything that even resembled being any sort of pedophilia or anything like that. I mean, I used to see him with young guys, adults, I mean, but so that actually came as a shock to me. I was like, really, because, and it's funny because years later, I was speaking to one of his close associates, one of the people that worked with him, who worked with him for years, who was straight, and of course, Alan was always that was Alan's thing. He always used to try to convert straight guys. Even my mom used to make fun of him for that shit. That was, I guess everybody has their whatever, but I never saw him do no fucking funky shit like that ever. And I actually lived in his apartment for a while with my aunt, so I always, he was always good to my family. I mean, he came to my grandparents' house and shit like that. So it's like that. When I heard about that, I was like, damn. And again, when I spoke to that dude who worked with him and shit, I brought that up. Um, and he was like, did he ever do anything? And I was like, no. And he's like, because I used to, wonder because he had kids, and his kids were always, and he was like, so and I was like, no. And he's like, yeah, no. So that's just some weird, fucked up shit,
There was always a sense of it, and once again, I never knew the guy, and I've only seen limited stuff about it. But it seems like it was almost like a rhetorical exercise, like a very gross, disturbing
Yeah,
rhetorical
I
exercise.
almost that was the same thing that we discussed. Was it might have been him just trying to be I don't know what the fuck word am I looking for?
G.G.
Con-
Allen of the
yeah,
literary world.
it's so funny that you said that because I was just thinking like Gigi Allen, just like fucking go be as disturbing as you can, or whatever. I don't know if he even or just I don't know. Maybe that was his interpretation of being controversial or punk rock. I don't know because I honestly I never saw no shit like that, and it bothered me because I have had a lot of bad experiences as a kid. I got molested many times as a kid on that punk rock, on that whole in my life. A lot of bad shit has happened to me. So I'm, if some shit had happened, I wouldn't be ashamed to say it or anything because I don't have any shame over having been molested and shit like that. Because, as a kid, you really are not in control of what other people do to you. So to carry shame around is kind of ridiculous because it's like if you're the victim of something, and I don't even feel like, yeah, of course I was victimized, but I think everybody gets victimized in different ways and different points in their life from different circumstances. And you learn how to. I mean, it definitely fucked me all up. It definitely made me a little bit more of probably a little bit more of an aggressive, violent person as I got older. That and my surroundings, that and being thrown into the Lower East Side, where pretty much violence was kind of the law of the land. Like if you weren't a bit of a hard ass, you kind of were, you know, uh,
Pray.
at the bottom of the food chain. Yeah, you
Yeah.
were prey. You kind of there was really no in between. So all those early experiences that were not very helpful for my development, all that shit made me quite an aggressive person when push came to shove. I guess you get the mentality of no one's gonna fucking hurt me again, and I'm gonna fucking take shit to a level where fucking people will know better than to fuck with me. And especially being that I'm not like a huge dude, so like I actually had to learn how to get quite proficient at violence due to my environment.
Yeah. Nicole Panter, you've seen Decline of Western Civilization.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
She's the Germs manager in that
Okay,
movie.
yeah, yeah.
When
I
she was
haven't
on,
seen the movie in a long time.
oh, it stands up. Don't worry. But
Yeah, I'm sure.
when she was on the podcast, she talked about how punk and I guess specifically hardcore is a place for that draws people with trauma who in
I'm
turn
sure.
wind up inflicting that trauma on other people who wind up inflicting that trauma on other people. And that seems to be kind of a recurring theme on this podcast. Like it's a safe place to go for a lot of stuff, but then there's also because of that a lot of unfortunate predator kind of behavior that's drawn to it too, I think.
I think that shit is just there in the music industry. Period. You know, and I think people who go to punk shows and stuff like that tend to be people who are not always. Some people just are into the music; it's a release for them. But I think it attracts a lot of damaged people and shit like that. Or at least it did. Now it probably attracts a lot of people who just like aggressive music. Look, everybody just needs some sort of a release for whatever it is they're going through. Music is a great release, whether it's dance music and you just want to go on fucking, you feel better, or hardcore, and you get punched a few times, fucking punch a few people and you feel better, and you didn't kill anybody and, everything's cool. Music is a release. It's a positive outlet. But I mean, I'll tell you, man, I mean, look at fucking all the shit that's happening now, and with in Hollywood with all these fucking musicians and all these fucking. It's like it's all depraved, fucking crazy fuckwit shit. So and,
Yeah.
and and we were all fucking broke. So, man, imagine how fucked up shit would have been if we had money to fuck with, you know. We were on some low budget. Well, we were on some low budget self destruction shit, like puffing glue, fucking shooting dope and smoking dust. You know, like that's some low budget destroy yourself shit. You know, I was like, yo, you know, a bag of dust, that's $10. I fucking that should last me like all day. You know, a bag of weed's like, you know, $30, $40, and I'll fucking smoke that shit. Like that's that. You know, we were just, bro. Everybody was a fucking nut back then, man.
I should just be grateful weed's cheaper now with my teenagers.
Oh shit, man. Yeah, for real though, man.
Yeah.
At least fucking they, you know, my son smokes weed. One of my sons do. You know, I'd rather have him smoke weed fucking than all that other shit that they got now. There's fucking
Yes.
drugs out there we ain't ever even heard of. I'm like, what the fuck is that shit?
I'll even take weed over PCP and glue, the old drugs.
Bro, yo, I don't even know how my brain managed to survive all that garbage, man. Fuck, dude.
Do you remember when slamming came to New York?
Oh, it was just they didn't. I can't really say it came to New York. I mean, the DC guys definitely brought what they saw on the West Coast to New York, and that really kind of happened. The first time that it really made a big imprint on New York was at Irving Plaza when the Stimulators played with the Circle Jerks, because all those guys and the Necros. It was the Necros opened up, then the Stimulators, and then the Circle Jerks, and all those DC guys kind of went fucking bananas. And that was the first time that the New York, not just the scene, but like the hardcore scene, but like the first time New York really saw that at a big show. You know, you got to remember too, there were a lot of people at that show who were not hardcore kids. A lot of people who were at that show just because it was a big rock show at Irving Plaza. You know, and the
Yeah.
Stimulators were not a hardcore band, so we pulled a lot of people that were just like, you know, Max's Kansas City rock and roll, punk-ish rock types. You know what I mean? Leather jacket, fucking people that would go see the Ramones type people. You know,
W- was that show a line in the sand to you guys in New York at that time? Like,
that
did
was
you
a fucking
feel?
line in the sand for me, man. There was no turning back after that shit. I was like, this is where I'm going, man. This shit's fucking old, boring. This is like, you know, I'm done with this Generation X Rizillos sounding shit. I'm going that way, man. I want to play some hard, angry. You got to understand, just like where my life was, that just was more, it spoke to me, you know.
Well, it's interesting to like look how hardcore spread on the East Coast, where, like you're saying, it goes to DC and there's Boston, but those are not everyone obviously, but there's economically affluent kind of punk scenes, and there are people that have money and resources versus New York,
That's
where
kind of
it's
why I think we were a little bit harder than all of those other places. Not so much that our band, I don't mean harder musically. I think most of those places had better bands, quite honestly. But New York always had much more fucking had more balls. It was just the fucking like all those people would come to New York and be scared while they were here, you know, the whole time they were here. And New York was a fucking scary place, and if you walked around, you were risking your ass. I mean, to be fair, in DC, especially Georgetown, if you were a punk rocker, you were going to get in fights too, especially with like all the military dudes who were like, you know, just hanging out, drunk, blah blah blah. You were going to get fucked with, you know, you get fucked with. It was weird, actually. One thing that I found interesting in DC was, and we didn't have anything like this really here, was like Ian, who I'm still close with. Those guys all used to rent their PA systems from all the go-go bands in DC. So there was this weird, and then of course the Bad Brains kind of made it even more like. So there was this weird connection between like the hardcore community and like the black community, like the go-go, you know, just like the straight, you know, it was really interesting, you know. In New York, all the different music and culture things that were happening would overlap, but not really. There wasn't really as much communication. You know, like we weren't on like as good terms with like our surroundings.
I guess I guess the cultural exchange would be happening more on a graffiti level, right? Because there's like,
Yeah, there was some people like Mackie, my old drummer, was a graffiti artist. There was a few people in hardcore who did graffiti back in the day and stuff like that. But I mean, everybody used to overlap and stuff at certain clubs and shit, but not really at hardcore or punk shows. But like, you went to Danceteria or any of those clubs back then, like the big clubs where people would just go to hang out and just be up all night until the sun came up and shit. Like people from all different types of, counterculture shit. Hip hop wasn't big then either. That shit was just starting to happen. So really interesting time period, really.
oh, it's incredible. Like, especially also throw into that the art stuff that's happening there,
Yeah,
no
man.
wave.
Oh, yeah, yeah. But again, with all of that cool shit that was going on, it was also a really, like, at least for me, it's a really fucked up place to grow up. You also got to remember that a lot of people were visitors. A lot of the people who were in, you know, most people didn't live down there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Like you never get to go home.
Yeah. So that shit gets, you know, it's funny because like last night, I still live in the city. I live way the fuck uptown now, right? But like, it's kind of hood, but there's a good amount of gentrification and shit going on up here too. There's only so much fucking city left. But like last night, I hear some kids, like literally kids playing outside, and it's like 1 in the morning or some shit. I'm like thinking to myself, you know, only in the hood do you hear kids playing in the street, like in the middle of the fucking night when you know they got school. They're supposed to be in school the next day. They're out there playing in the fucking streets. I'm like, go the fuck home. Shut the fuck up.
I really do think there's an amazing documentary that obviously your own documentary, but I think there's
Yeah,
an
yeah.
amazing documentary that could be done about kids that wound up in the punk scene because there were a few of you like
Oh,
Stephen
wait till you
McDonald.
see mine, man.
Yeah. But Stephen McDonald from Red Cross, who, when he was on the show for the first time, talked about being kidnapped when he was 12 years old by his 27-year-old quote unquote girlfriend and her parents. And it was like a weird Peter Pan Neverland thing where adults and kids were intermingling, but that's dangerous.
You know what? I was actually fucking saying this shit to my guitarist the other day. I don't remember how the fuck it came up. But I was like, it's a weird thing because again, like I was saying in music, there's always been all kinds of fucking crazy shit like that because there's not too many places in the world where people of all, where usually you hang out with people that are your age,
Mhm.
and that's how it goes through life. You hang out with people your age. Pretty much one of the only places that's not like that is in the fucking music world. I'm sure there's other places where it's equally, but because as you get older, your fans keep getting recycled. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
like one day you're the same age as your fans. 10 years later, you're not really the same age as all your fans. 10 years later, you got a whole fucking new audience, and some of the old fans still will come out and see you 10 fucking more years by it. You know what I'm saying? But a lot of people, I guess, just don't fucking look, man, most musicians are fucking in a frozen state of pre-adolescent development, just like most, just like a lot of guys. I mean, just like not to get myself in trouble, but just like most gangs or clubs in general or whatever, you're kind of frozen in a state of this is, you know what I'm saying? And musicians are fucking, who doesn't want, when you love doing what you do, who doesn't want to fucking stay like that forever? But that's not reality, though.
I wonder if the Rolling Stones have played a show at this point where they're the oldest guys in the room.
Oh, I'm fucking sure they have. Are you fucking kidding me, man? Most of the people their age can't make it fucking out of the house, man.
That's what
Those
I was
are
thinking.
incredible. Yo, fucking God bless Mick Jagger. That motherfucker's badass. You motherfucker runs around more than people fucking, in their 30s, for fuck's sake, man. I'm like, this motherfucker is running around that big ass stage, not going out of breath, fucking moving all over the place, singing the whole time. I'm like, God damn, man. Fuck, did he just like get a fucking blood transfusion at sound check, for fuck's sake?
I was going to say they all learned from Keith's, what was it, Switzerland blood washing?
I'm telling you, man. I heard that Lemmy tried to do that shit, and they said he would die if they did. But I don't know if that's true or not. So I'm not trying to start rumors. But you know what? Yeah, man. I'm fucking, I'm getting older, right? And I'm actually really loving where I am in my life. It's like I still love playing music, I still love touring and shit, but like fucking life is great, and I'm not trying to compete in that world in any way, shape, or form. It's just I play music. This is what I do. I love doing it. Married, great life. I got two fucking kids that are one's gonna be 20 fucking. Yeah, I'm not gonna have any teenagers soon. My son's gonna be 20, and but next this month, Jesus Christ, and the other one's fucking 22. I got a great wife. I got a great life, and I'm still fucking healthy, strong, and fucking having a good fucking time, man. I'm lucky I made it through all that other bullshit, man. Like, so lucky that it does not fall short on me ever.
Yeah, like not to make entertainment out of your life, but you have had this sort of like unbelievable journey to watch uh, happen from like an outsider's perspective. Like not, and I'm not talking about the journey to get to, the bands and playing the shows. I'm talking about even just like post that. Like I think I first met you at Planet Kensington here in Toronto. You guys did a surprise show up here one time when you guys were playing.
That's not the one that Danko was at.
I think Danko might have been there. No, 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 no. This is way before that. No, this is like
Oh,
Revenge,
okay,
pre-Revenge. So this is like when
because
you guys.
he was at those some of those gigs as well.
Yeah, he
Anyway,
was. He definitely was. Yeah, this was like I think Steve Goof from the Bunch of Fucking Goofs put on the show.
bro, I don't remember, man. This is 1,000 shows later, bro.
Well, I got to talk to you about Toronto because Toronto plays a huge part in your book. But anyway,
That's
but
Montreal more than Toronto, but Toronto, I do love Toronto. Great fucking place.
well, isn't Toronto where you link up with those twin skinheads?
No, they weren't twins. They were Yab Orbit and Bruno and all those guys. I actually met them in Montreal. I believe that they were from Toronto.
Because
Originally Yab Orbit.
not to get off my point, but there's
Mhm.
a friend of mine, and there's a story you tell in the book about walking up behind this couple on a date that were kind of goth looking, and the two guys just beating the shit out of the
Don't tell me
dude.
one of them was them.
She was the girl, she thinks. But she
That's
never made the connection till like way later when she read the book and was like, "Oh my god, I think that was that night."
that really sucks.
And she's obviously come through, and I think the
Yeah.
guy was okay. And it's
So
such a
yeah, no, he didn't get it that bad. I mean, not this fucking that it's ever good, but see, that's the thing is like a lot of fucked up things happened back in those days, and I definitely was a bit of a fucking asshole. I was pretty violent, and I ran with a lot of violent people. But in in my defense, if there is such a thing, when I was in Canada at that time, I was there illegally. I had snuck through the border, so I wasn't even supposed to be there. I was 15 years old, and I was living with dudes who were in their 20s, and they were violent, and I mean violent criminals. Like these dudes were straight, like Clockwork Orange was a way of life for these guys. Like, let's go out and put a lot of people in the hospital and rob some of them, but really it's more about just going out and being violent and seeing what the fuck happens and getting, and these were unfortunately the people that I wound up linking up with. And I was, again, homeless, 15, and was actually talking about this, not this, but this type of shit with my wife the other day, just like how sometimes you can get roped into some really bad things just by circumstance sometimes, especially when you're young, because like that if you don't take part, your ass is next. That's kind of the name of the game when you're dealing with like violent criminals. Like you kind of, if you don't, yeah, if you're not part of it, you're a witness. You dig what I'm saying? Like now you're a liability. So, I did a lot of really fucked up shit. And if it was her, I feel bad. I would like to apologize to, her friend and to her for putting her through that mental anguish of that. I've been assaulted. I know what it's like. I know it's not pleasant. I've been put in the hospital. In fact, those same guys put me in the hospital. I guess that was kind of my karma. But again, not to make light of it, they were in their 20s and I was a kid. So, I really was kind of at their, I lived with them. Where was I? I was going to go back with them that night. And, we did do a lot of other shit that, that's the thing is I don't, I, I own my fuck ups and I just try to, I don't forgive myself for any of this type of shit. I'm not one of those. I don't prescribe to that AA mentality of you have to forgive yourself type of shit. Actually, I don't feel like I have the right to forgive myself for a lot of things I did. But I do know that as I move forward in my life, I'm not going to do those same things again because I have tried to learn from my mistakes and become a better human being as I move forward. So that being said, yes, I've done a lot of fucked up things.
Well, and that's what I was the point I was trying to make is the journey. Like I met you at that show and I was like, oh man, this guy, you're like, not that you're not still intimidating, but at that point I was like, you still had an edge to you in a way that I'm like, I don't know if this guy's not going to punch me in the face at some point just in this conversation. So to see you,
Good Lord.
but to see you come to terms with, like you said, this heroin, yeah, I earned it this time. But this harrowing journey you've been on, and like you're saying, like not forgiving yourself, but taking account of things that did happen. I think that's really admirable, and that's something that I think that has to happen because otherwise, like, there's no alternative. Do people just get worse and make? And is it just an unending cycle?
Brother, I can't speak for other people. I can only, and I don't necessarily think that, the not forgiving yourself is something that everybody else should emulate. That's just me. That's just me because I feel like I feel like the day I forgive myself is the day that I say, okay, it's all good now. And it actually isn't all good now. So, it's actually not all good. Like I still, you know what? The shit did happen. So it's not all good. That being said, you take into consideration the circumstances, the conditions, blah 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 blah. I mean, you can understand why a lot of young people make a lot of the mistakes they make, and you can understand why a lot of adults make the mistakes they make. You put in various conditions like surroundings, who your influences are, your upbringing, what you're going through, what you're being subjected to. Why you take some of these fucking little machete fucking soldiers in Africa who are like 12 years old, you would have fucking raised that same kid in a family that fucking loved them and fucking fed them right and took care of them right and gave them the fucking education right. Those same kids would be fucking like, you know, they'd be amazing, productive fucking human beings. But because they were like abused and violated and mistreated and then handed a fucking machete and given drugs and told, if you don't fucking do this, whatever. It's a fucked up world, man. So all you can do is just try to fucking get better from whatever it is that has happened to you.
Yeah, like I didn't. It wasn't until I became a parent that I realized how fragile we are as children. Like we are
Yeah,
just like
yeah,
clay.
yeah, man. And people fucking once you get fucked up as a kid, that shit can be a lifelong journey to try to one recognize it at all, two try to do anything about it, and three, a lot, whatever. Sadly, a lot of people don't even make that. You know, I spent most of my life, unfortunately, way too much anger and rage inside me. Now I kind of understand why. Doesn't make it any, you know, doesn't make it any better that. But I mean, no, it does make it better. I understand why now. Um, I, I think I handle it a lot better. I started when they started working on the documentary. I I started seeing a therapist because I preemptively was like, you know what, this shit's gonna open up a lot of fucking shit. It's gonna open up a lot of cans of fucking worms here, man. And I'm gonna be talking about. I didn't know what the fuck they were gonna ask me. I didn't know what it was gonna lead to. I didn't know what kind of interviews. I knew they were interviewing a shit ton of people, and I knew they were interviewing me, and I knew that shit could get fucking weird. So I started seeing a therapist because I knew that a lot of shit was still really fucked up in my head and still unresolved and shit like that. So, and this was a few years ago, and I feel like it actually was a really good experience for me because, I found that the more I was able to talk about things that had really been fucking with me, the less, the less awkward it became, the more I was able to process it. I think that shit made it all a little easier. You got something that really bothers you, you talk it through, you talk it through, you talk it through until it doesn't bother you so much anymore. You're like, okay, I can talk about this without fucking getting all like, you know,
Yeah, and like you're saying, like I can see from my personal perspective how 12 steps wouldn't be for me,
yeah,
but the idea of a group of people getting together and talking about their problems, I can see how that would be beneficial because we all struggle, right? Like there's
yeah,
like you're
that's life, dude.
yeah, and it's but back to stuff which is way more trivial than the stuff we've been talking about. Well, not to me. I mean, this is and probably not to
I
yourself
don't
too.
do group therapy. I have just a therapist that I work with, and
Yeah,
yeah, and it just, for me, that shit has been helpful. That's all I'm
yeah.
saying.
And I think that's another thing that comes up on here a lot is that a lot of people that are in this scene and who have lived a lot less wild lives than you've lived are dealing with PTSD, and
Sure.
it's amazing how it shows up in different ways in your life, and dealing with it can give you a lot of peace.
Yeah, well, that's the goal. I think most people have a certain amount of PTSD, and they just don't even realize it because I don't think anybody gets off easy. I think everybody is subjected to a certain amount of trauma in their life, and you know, uh, everybody has a tipping point, and I think it's impossible to make it through life without a certain amount of trauma. I mean, life is full of trauma. Even just losing your parents, so we all go through that trauma. You know, losing your pets for fuck's sake. Forget about everything else that happens along the way. We all experience trauma. There's just different levels. I mean, but it's all relative.
Yeah, yeah. I think we could go on for this forever, and I don't mean
Yeah,
to
yeah,
make
yeah.
you keep talking about this stuff because I've got way more nerdy stuff to make you talk about.
Let's geek out, brother. Nerd. Let's
Well,
nerd it out.
so the lineup for the Disco Smoothies, uh, it's kind of a
Okay.
super group.
It kind of was actually. Now, for those of you who are not as much of a nerd as he is and don't know this shit, Disco Smoothie was, excuse me again, Disco Smoothie was supposed to be the first Cro-Mags show, but I did not feel confident with our performance at that time. We switched drummers like two or three practices before the show. and I knew that everybody knew I was working on a new band called the Cro-Mags. It was like the buzz on the punk, hardcore, whatever the fuck New York scene, right? Everybody, Harley's got a new band. He's working on Cro-Mags, Cro-Mags. I was writing it everywhere. It was fucking me and Eric. You'll see pictures of me and Eric at a SSD Control. We both had Cro-Mags SSD Control show. We both had Cro-Mags written on our heads, and this was before. This was like 80 or 81, right? So anyway, Disco Smoothie was the original singer for the Beastie Boys. John Berry was the vocalist. This guy, Dave Hahn, who played with a New York band called The Mad, he was the drummer at that show. And this other guy, Dave Stein, who was the guitarist for Even Worse. Not the attorney Dave Stein, that's a different Dave Stein for people who make that mistake. Um, anyway, and we only actually, and I was on bass, and we only played one show with that lineup, and then I knew I had to kind of restructure things a little bit. We did like 5 or 6 original songs, including "Don't Tread on Me" and "Do Unto Others," which had different lyrics at that time, and like 2 Dead Boys covers. And that was, we opened up for the Stimulators at the Peppermint Lounge.
So were the Dead Boys kind of the like were they because they're like the band that seems like they stuck around a little bit more into that second wave of bands.
Uh, Not really. They kind of, I think they were, I could be wrong. You're the nerd. I think they were done by 80, if I'm not mistaken. Like maybe 79 was like their last run. And then I think that's when Stiv started Lords of the New Church.
You're right. I meant I guess more in the sense of like stylistically. Like I feel like the Dead Boys are as much as all those first wave New York bands are punk. Like I agree with you, punk doesn't have to be one sound, but the Dead Boys wind up becoming the gritty band, and certainly had kind of
They were
like
from Ohio even too, though.
I
So
know.
let's, they weren't even like really from New York.
I
Yeah.
know. Well, that's the thing about the Cleveland stuff. I know you probably will debate me on this, but I think punk really gets kind of coalesces in Cleveland before kind of moving to New York.
I disagree, but I think actually, I also don't think that I think New York is kind of the starting place, but I think that Detroit was kind of the place that shot the cannonball, and it just like landed in New York. Because if it wasn't for Iggy and the MC5 and bands like that, where the fuck was Blue Cheer from? I don't even remember. They were pretty
San
bad.
Francisco, right out west.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah. But pretty much, I think Detroit had a lot to do with, and it's funny because I had this discussion with my wife the other day. Iggy credits the Doors with him doing what he did, so I guess that means it kind of started in LA. Is that, is that, I mean, because those guys were like the antithesis of like hippies in there, even though they were kind of at the tail end of that moment. Those guys were not fucking hippies, man. That was some altogether different shit. Like that was some really nihilistic shit right there, man. So if that's what inspired Iggy to, because I think the story he told was like he saw them at like some like a high school or some shit, and it was one of their not good shows. Like it was like one of the ones where like Jim's like rolling around on the floor, like fucking unable to fucking do anything other than like drool or whatever the fuck, and he's like, I can do this. That's kind of, so like that. So I like to credit Detroit for, inspiring bands like the Ramones and all these other bands, just with that, the Stooges and fucking MC5. And Wayne Kramer was a good friend of my mom's, and I knew Wayne.
Yeah, there's also the legend of the Detroit Dogs, who moved to New York in '75, played the show Kiss got signed at, and Johnny used to go and see them play, and they would just go on stage and just play in leather jackets and jeans.
Uh,
And this is during the Johnny Glam era, but apparently that
yeah,
was an
yeah, yeah, yeah.
influence.
Yeah, that would make sense. I also always, felt that the Ramones kind of copped that whole thing just because, I mean, I know those guys. I knew all of them. And to them, it was kind of like, we wanted to walk in and look like a gang. Like they were kind of like Shana Na meets uh, fucking, what was that movie with Sylvester Stallone and
Oh, The Outsiders?
no,
No,
the whole, with him and the Fonz and fucking where they're all,
Omer Graffiti?
The Lords of
Oh,
Flatbush.
Lords of Flat. Okay, of course, yeah.
Okay, so it's like it's just like that look where like everybody's
Yeah.
got a leather jacket. It's like the jeans and the t-shirt and the leather jacket. It's like we're a gang. And they were such fucking not the brightest bunch of guys from Queens, no less. They actually I think my aunt went to high school with them. They lived like not far from my fucking grandmother and my family in Queens.
When they had the falling out with each other, was that perceptible to people that were fans of the band, like Johnny and Joey? I mean,
That shit went back so far. I mean, that all went back to fucking what's her face.
Linda. Yeah.
Yeah, she was. I never really liked her, but anyway.
That band's so interesting because you have two, maybe I can't think of two more disparate personalities than Johnny and Joey in the band together. Um, when I was in high school, my math teacher was super good friends with Johnny, and we went out and had dinner with him. And no one in my class liked punk or knew anything about punk. So it was just basically what I'm doing to you now, but just with Johnny for 2 hours, but not for the podcast or anything, just for me. And a great guy that night, but I could tell he would be a difficult dude to be in a band with. And CJ said so when he was on the show.
Can I pause for 1 second? All right. So what was it? You were asking about CJ, or
Yeah, look, when CJ was on the show, he talked about how, we talked about how like him being in the military really helped
oh yeah,
him adjusting to life in the band with Johnny.
yeah. That's fucking funny. I actually knew CJ before he joined them, and I remember when he auditioned. Um, he's a really good guy, man. I like him a lot. I think he probably. I don't think there was anybody that could have filled in Dee Dee's shoes better than him.
Yeah, I kind of think it's interesting to think about anyone else stepping into that role, and I don't think the Ramones make it anywhere near as far as they made it without someone like that coming in that could deal with Johnny and still be sympathetic to Joey.
I don't know if he told you, and I'm just gonna say I don't know if this is true because I don't want to say it is if he didn't want this out or if it's not true. I think he was on Dust when he auditioned for them. And I was laughing, and I was like, "No wonder you got the fucking job."
When you're flying with the angels, anything can happen.
Hey man, you know what? You fucking rolling with the fucking Ramones. You got to like bring your IQ down a little bit to fit in. You know what I'm saying? They were probably just like, "He's perfect."
One thing CJ talked about is
Oh,
how much hardcore fucked with Johnny and like how he had to be fast and how they had to be the fastest band, and in turn that fucked with Joey because Joey couldn't fit the words in. It was too fast for him to sing, and it was something that really bothered Joey. But CJ would try, and Johnny just would never slow down.
well, there's also the factor that when you play songs for many many years and your body gets so used to playing them, sometimes you start playing them faster and faster and you don't even really realize this because your body you're getting so mechanically good at doing it. Like if you, for instance, if you listen to the Bad Brains Roar cassette and then you listen to the Rock for Light album, a lot of those takes are just faster,
Yeah.
and it almost loses some of the nuances to the groove. Some of the little embellishments and the little hooks and pop pop and all that little rhythmic shit. Some of it gets a little lost because it's just fucking coming at you so fucking fast. So, but I think that happens. I mean, even the fucking Stimulators started playing our songs a lot faster towards the end, and it didn't even sound as good. But it was just like, number one, everything around you is speeding up, so you sort of unintentionally start catching up, and with everybody else, and and again, you play the same fucking song a million fucking times. It tends to, you really have to like consciously like pull back,
Yeah.
just to keep it in its normal pace. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like
Loud,
when I
fast
play,
rules.
yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like to this day, when I'm playing stuff off of Age of Quarrel, I have to really do my best to lay back in the pocket because I can play the songs a lot fucking faster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I guess it would have been hard to beat Johnny. Like you're saying, they were the toughest gang in town type thing. In music, I mean. And then all of a sudden there's this new wave of kids that, not so much with like the
Yeah.
Stimulators era, but I mean like the
No,
next
no.
wave.
Yeah, but even 70s was also because the Bad Brains started coming
Yeah.
down in the 70s. So it had already started to switch over. Ramones are going back to the mid 70s, you dig?
Yeah.
When their first shit, like, when their first record come out, like
76, 75.
75, and they had been together since I think 74. So, it already had a little bit of a time stamp on it from then. And
Hmm.
also, if you really think about it musically, man, all that stuff, even the Misfits, all those songs are kind of, and I'm saying this not in a bad way. I think it's actually kind of cool. It's such classic Americana stuff. It all, if you listen to the chord progressions, it really all sounds like the old Phil Spector, like girl groups. Just like listen to the cover that the Ramones did of "Be My Baby." Be my baby, my one and only. And the chord progression. It's like all that old Ramones shit has a feeling of that era musically and the way it's written, combined with fucking Sha Na Na. The shit to me was always a little bit, it just kind of reminded me, the Ramones in particular, I'm talking about, reminded me of Sha Na Na meets the Beach Boys at Rockaway Beach.
I think they would be very flattered by that. I think they would be very happy.
Oh, fucking absolutely. I'm sure of it. But it has that classic Americana thing. And to me, in those early, those 77 days, that's why I hate to say it, but that's why I liked the Pistols and the Clash and shit like that a little bit more. Because to me, that shit was, the Ramones was a little too sha-na-na-ish. I was just like, all I could think of was like Bowser and also fucking that stupid movie, Rock and Roll High School. That really kind of, what the fuck is this shit? Like, to me, that wasn't punk. This is like, that might as well have been, fucking Grease. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm like, what the fuck is this shit?
Yeah.
So, I was more about like Sid Vicious, fucking Johnny Rotten, dog chains and fucking safety pins and fuck you and spit in your face type shit. that spoke to me, you know?
You moved to New York, I think it's like, what, 3 days after he died? Sid Vicious?
Yeah, like literally, I was in London when he died, and we got here like, we, and Stimulators were supposed to play with him actually, and so I was looking forward to meeting him, hopefully, because it was like not with him. I'm sorry. We were supposed to play Monday. He was playing the whole weekend, so my intention was to go see him play that weekend, leading up to our show.
Yeah.
So anyway, that did not happen. Um, Actually, it was just the fucking anniversary of his death. What day is it today?
Uh,
Yesterday, I
yeah, I was
believe.
going to say it's this week.
Yeah, it was
Um,
yesterday. I was, yeah, I stayed in room 100. I'm sure after uh, they took the police tape down and cleaned up the room. Like literally, I was the first person in room 100 where Nancy died. I still have the key.
Wow. Did you get the key back then? Like when?
Oh, hold on a second.
Oh, wow. That's crazy. That's the key.
There's the key to room 100. A friend of mine took this picture. It's Sid playing at Max's, but that's the actual key. And the funny shit is it's the key that he had because they didn't replace them because they were so fucking they just arrested him. This was back then. The cops really didn't do things the way they do now, and so yeah. Anyway,
I, I remember as a kid, like just getting into punk, reading in the National Enquirer that Rocket's Red Glare. I
oh
shouldn't
yeah,
laugh about this, but
Rocket.
claim like there was like that whole thought that he
Yeah,
went.
no. He actually, I think he started that rumor. I remember that. He was an asshole. I never really liked him too much.
Yeah, because you're like there's like a lot of not so nice people running around this punk scene that weren't involved in
Yeah,
bands.
man. It was, people fucking like to romanticize that shit back then, but it was pretty fucking grimy, dude. It was really grimy.
Did you know the guys from Pure Hell? I guess because
Of
they would have
course,
backed up
to this
Sid, right?
day, yeah, I know them well. I don't know if they played with, if they were his backup band because he had his own group, uh, like
I,
for
I
the
think they maybe the guitar player played with him. I know there's like a photo of him with them on stage, maybe at Max's.
It may have happened. I missed all those shows, but I know those guys. Yeah,
They're a band that I feel like in recent years people have started to discover outside of New York, but like a band that I guess because they only had that one single that came out of England that was never really
they were
brought
a
up.
pretty significant band in New York. And but just people are such assholes that it's like when the Bad Brains fucking came to town, like they kind of blew Pure Hell out of the water just because it was like so new and different. And I guess there was, not to sound like an asshole, I guess there was only room for one fucking black punk band at that fucking time for everybody to fucking give a fuck about it. It was just like, okay, now we're on to the Bad Brains or whatever. I don't know. It was just old. It was dated. It was kind of like the Stimulators. You know what I'm saying? And Bad Brains came and killed us all. They fucking smoked us all, man. They fucking destroyed the Stimulators. They destroyed Pure Hell. They came in and it was just like, okay, fucking everything has just changed, you know.
They're the band that you hear that about the most, and the band you hear about it the second most is DOA. And there's that famous
Yeah, no,
DOA
no.
show.
Which one?
I think there's one where they did the I guess it's like the two guitar lineup. It was maybe at the Peppermint Lounge or
Yeah, that sounds about right. And I think that was the first time. What's his face from the Subhumans may have joined them on bass at that point.
Useless.
He may have at that point.
Yeah, I think that's when they moved to the five piece or the two guitar lineup.
First time I saw them, they were a three piece. It was just Chuck, Randy, and Joey.
Yeah, they're like a band that I feel like I guess being from Canada, I feel like also kind of gets forgotten a little bit in the American hardcore story because they're Canadian. Titularly, they invent it, right?
I don't know if they did. I know they were the first time that somebody commercially used the term hardcore in context to this type of music, but I don't think that they were the first people to use it in context with this music because in New York we were already starting it had gone from punk to hardcore punk hardcore, and then they came out with the album Hardcore
81.
81.
Yeah.
So I don't, but the interesting thing with that is that hardcore was such an organic, um, it like the change from punk to hardcore kind of happened all over America, kind of at the same time, and it just like the different regions just had slightly different takes on it, But it was really just punk rock moving into the next phase. It just got faster, and the pogo dancing just changed into slamming, moshing, thrashing, whatever the fuck, you know. And it was just interesting that it all kind of happened simultaneously. And then, they had that album come out, but that was already happening.
You're right, because it's you see it in England a couple years earlier where it's not called hardcore, but you do have that sort of like hardcoring of punk.
Resurgence where and exactly what it really was just because especially in England because they're so fucking trendy, they once some of the basically once fucking Nancy died, all the fucking people forget, man, most of the first generation of punk bands were not just trying to play, they were trying to be bands. A lot of them were trying to be successful. Like they were all signed to fucking major labels. Generation X, fucking The Clash, Susie and the Banshees, even fucking like 999, like all these lesser bands, if you want to call them that, like all those bands they were all getting signed to fucking major labels. Then fucking Nancy died, and basically all the drama and all that shit, and everybody just started fucking. The press was like, everybody like punk killed itself. It
Yeah.
just like nobody wanted to fucking sign punk bands anymore. That all the drama of the Sex Pistols and every fucking thing else, and then the few surviving bands like the Clash started going completely pop. In my opinion, I felt like they were catering to the American radio and kind of abandoning their roots. That's how I felt then. Now as a musician growing up, I could be like, okay, well, they want to do some new shit. But back then, I took it kind of personal. But point is the media had basically decided that punk was done, and the labels had started dropping all the bands, and the only people who were fucking still going deep and going hard and fucking going in were the next phase of punk, which was your discharge bands and your exploiteds and your all of that. The more, and it just got spikier and more, you know, mohawks and
A lot less commercial at that point too, right? And it became
well,
like,
it became less of yeah, more because in the early days it was really fashion conscious. People like to fucking again romanticize it, make it like it was this big political statement and blah blah, blah. And it was just another fucking wave of British punk, of British music and fashion. This shit was all about fucking fashion. Malcolm McLaren and his fucking store and all that shit. It was really about dressing up and playing this new fucking music, and more than politics or anything. It was you were just rebelling against the other previous trends and previous fashions and cultural stuff. You were going against the grain.
but and then it's like, and then right out of the gate, there are a bunch of bands that are like the Desperate Bicycles from England. I don't know if you've heard them, but they're very much like, do this. It's cheap. It's easy. Go do it. Everyone start a band, make this music. Or someone like Rat Scabies, who shows up, like you brought him up earlier with, sneaking into that show, but he's producing records for bands. Like he really seems like someone who was part of that first wave, but really encouraging everyone that kind of getting into it in that second wave or like immediately after.
Well, I'm glad they did because I wouldn't have a gig if we all hadn't kept going.
Yeah.
But but in hindsight, I think there was a moment where the music started to suffer and uh, the imagery really became more important again. Like it got that way as time. Like I don't think a lot of the second and third generation bands are as good musically. Well, there's a few exceptions, you know, but overall, I think the songwriting got less interesting.
Well, one band that's always been interesting to me and no one's able to talk to me about them is the Mad.
They
Uh,
were interesting. They were interesting. They were a bit much for me, honestly, as a kid because I wasn't into all the theatrical stuff. I was never really into like Alice Cooper, and I was never into all the look. Screaming Mad George was an amazing artist, but he always took places to such a fucking gross place. Like all his art was always just like people, like people getting mutilated and babies getting ripped out of fucking bellies and people eating vomit and shit, like all kinds of really just like. And I'm 12, and I'm like, ew, he'd be up there on stage like ripping fucking fetuses out of his fucking belly, and then like sticking his hand down his pants and pulling out shit and eating it. I mean, it was just like peanut butter and crackers and shit like that. But I'm like trying not to puke. I'm like, yo, fuck this, you know. I was like, so I couldn't even really appreciate the music as much as I probably would have had he not been doing all of that shit, And we used to dig with them, man.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Like, as a kid, at least, are you seeing the behind the scenes and knowing, like,
Yeah, and he'd be making up the shit, like, and he'd be like, "Try it, it's good." And I'd be like, "No." he's like, "It's just peanut butter and crackers and blah blah blah." And I'm like, "No."
and then he goes on and does the effects for the Reanimator movies.
Yeah, man. Fuck. No, he's fucking. It's fucked up too because I remember doing an interview back then, a pretty big interview, and I kind of went deep like that because as a kid you don't know what the fuck you're saying. They should have never gave me a microphone when I was a kid. Almost every time they did, I said some fucked up shit. I kind of shit on the man. I always felt bad for it because of that. Like I just was just like they're gross. I was just like I don't want to see that shit. Like I basically just said what I said to you, but different, and I kind of Anyway.
Were these people from the old
I
punk scene?
apologize to all you listeners. I am just rambling. We're just bullshitting here. And I look, man.
That's what I told you. This is not going to be like any other podcast you've ever done because I'm not going to hit you with the same
Oh,
questions.
Christ. Well, I hope this doesn't suck. But anyway.
Well, believe me, we're 600 episodes deep of this sucking. So
Okay. Well, all right. So, you suck well, I guess.
I do. I suck with the best of them.
All right. Good. Well, suck away. All right.
Going briefly back to the Mad and I guess stimulators and stuff, were these people freaked out about this new direction and new scene that you're kind of following yourself into? Or I guess you're forming at this time in terms of like, because it's a lot more kind of glammy and theatrical than what would come next with you guys.
I think the Bad Brains, again, once they fucking arrived, it was kind of a jolt to everybody's system. I mean, they were still punks when they came to New York. They were still punk rockers. But that's just musically, that was such a fucking kick in everybody's ass that you kind of just knew there was a change coming, man. And then that and that fucking that Circle Jerk Stimulator show at Irving Plaza with the Necros, man, that was like, okay, this storm has arrived. Like things are now different than they were yesterday.
Yeah, and like you said, it's interesting because hardcore comes to New York a little bit later, but doesn't find any more fertile ground.
I disagree though, because again, like I say, it kind of happened everywhere all at the same time. It's just that everybody had their own version of it, because New York had a lot of hardcore bands in 1980. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I believe not the Mad, I'm sorry, the Mob were already together by 80. There's this other band that I don't think they put out anything called, what the fuck were they called? It'll come to me, but there was a bunch of bands, like even Heart Attack, who were not a hardcore band. They were definitely more hardcore than they were punk in the previous shape. So you had this whole little group of bands from the Mob to Heart Attack, then came like Urban Waste and some others. So we're talking early, like maybe 80, 81, which is right in time when you would put the beginning of hardcore stamp. Like I always considered it to be 80, really. Sid died in 79. All the labels and everything abandoned punk rock, and 80 was really kind of, in my opinion, when hardcore really, that was it. It came out of the ashes of 79.
Now it's like in '80 when, like you're saying, hardcore starts coming in and there's that change that happens. I know we're getting into like a matter of months with some of this stuff,
Yeah.
but like I think of that
Well,
seven.
but check it out though, because that late 70s is also when all those first era of hardcore bands really started.
Yeah,
Bad Brains, Black Flag, I don't remember.
Germs and
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't remember when the Germs formed and broke up, but like that whole, and even though the Germs are a little bit more punk-ish, it's definitely that's why like, but '80s really where you, I got to put the timestamp there because all those first generation hardcore bands started as punk bands, and it wasn't really until the end of punk when the term hardcore punk started getting thrown around. Because again, in my opinion, the death of Sid, the dumping of all the the labels, just the whole changeover. It was like the only people who left who were still going to fucking carry the banner were the fuckers that were willing to do it on their own, put out their own records, put out like we took basically followed the lead from like Stiff Records, and you started having I guess Touch and Go and Discord and all these like the punk bands that didn't have any the hardcore the punk bands that were turning into hardcore who had no fucking ambitions to get a major record deal and be the Clash or be Generation X or Gen X, you know, those bands that kept going hard, they took it to a place like SOA, where it was just simple and hard and fucking aggressive and angry, and we're putting it out ourselves.
it would be interesting if New York had have had, like, I guess there was Rat Cage, but if there had been like a Discord or a Touch and Go to put
Oh,
out all these bands, right? Because everyone's kind of putting out their own singles on their
yeah.
own labels.
Well, that original Cro-Mag demo that you may have heard, where I played all the instruments, that was supposed to come out on Rat Cage, and for whatever reason, my then manager, the Stimulators manager, didn't like the deal that Dave was offering me. But it would have been great if it would have came out then, just to have that time stamp on it. But he only put out like that Beastie Boys thing, the Young and the Useless, and the first Agnostic Front album, I think.
There's all the Heart Attack record too, right?
I
And then he was supposed to put out
I know.
something.
I think he put out a compilation with them on it, perhaps.
I'm trying to remember
You
now.
know, I don't fucking remember. I'm now we're down to like fine details. But that first AF record was great. That first Beastie Boys too, and they were all classic. Uh, Fucking Dave was a trip, man. He was like the first. That had to be like the first transgender motherfucker right there, man. He was fucking coming around in his dress and his fucking combat boots on his skateboard and fucking lipstick and shit, and we're all just like, okay. Like we didn't really think. No, it was like, okay, Dave's Dave. From what I heard, he moved to Switzerland and became a Charlie Chaplin impersonator, and eventually he went full all the way, got snipped and all that shit, and then died shortly after. Fucking crazy life.
Yeah, Jane County too, right? Like
Oh, I
there's
knew
a few
Jane. Yeah,
trains.
yeah, yeah. I knew. Jane. It's funny because like it's like people bug out on all this shit. I'm like, what are you talking about? Man? Shit's been going around forever, man. I grew up on the New York punk rock scene, man. This shit ain't nothing new to me, man. Fuck you people are bugging for. You know?
Yeah, and it's
uh,
and when you hear, have you heard that Jane County recording? It came out a couple years ago. It's the stuff she did for Bowie when she was doing
no,
Bowie demos.
no,
It's like it's 73, 72, and it
no,
sounds like punk. Like it is.
no, man. Yo, when I first met her, she was still going by Wayne, and that shit was punk. I
Yeah,
saw them play, bro. I saw them play, man. I saw all that shit, dude.
yeah, yeah. Like
Yeah.
that's the thing is like we could just talk about. I haven't
Oh,
asked you about Northern Ireland and seeing
oh,
those Irish bands.
that was fucking awesome. That was amazing. That was a life changing trip for me. 1980, fucking Northern Ireland. Well, we went all over Ireland, but yeah, man. I've seen some things, man. Y'all got to check out the movie, man. Check out well, if you haven't read the book, you should check it out because we could fucking talk for days. But a lot of these stories are in the book. A lot of other stories, and the movie's fucking movie. I gotta say, man, I was a little worried because when you give people the rights to make a film about you and you're not actually involved with the process, I didn't have anything to do with I didn't even see the fucking thing until it was pretty much done. So you're like, you never know what the fuck they're going to say, what, what other people are going to say. And, you know, I've done a lot of crazy shit, some of it good and some of it bad. So you never knew which direction this was going to go, but it came out, I got to say, it came out pretty fucking good.
There's so many things I want to talk to you about, and I don't want to keep you all. I could keep you forever, and and I still think we could find new stories that aren't in the book or the movie.
I'll
But
have to come back and do your show
yes,
sometime in another few hundred episodes.
yeah. Did you ever see Madonna's band, The Breakfast Club, when she was playing with The Breakfast Club or
No,
Emmy and the Emmys?
no.
What about the band KGB featuring Vic Venom, later of Nausea?
I remember KGB playing, but I never saw them to my knowledge. I may have seen them and just not remember.
Were you at the Fear SNL show?
Oh yeah, of course.
What were your memories of that day?
Oh man, it was just a fucking lot of chaos, a lot of fun. I mean, I have several just little moment memories, like stupid shit. I mean, obviously the best memory for me was just standing there looking up because I was a little kid, looking up at John Belushi and Henry Rollins and Ian MacKaye standing there talking, and I'm just like, I didn't have shit to say. Like I was just like I wish that I had like a fucking camera in my head, bro.
But the funny thing is, like, you're just a little kid, obviously, at that point, but you're also like got a couple years on those
Oh
dudes in
yeah,
terms of
yeah, no.
shows.
Oh yeah, no. Most of them dudes from DC at that point, all like I don't want to say they looked up to me because I was younger than them, but they looked up to me as a musician and as a somebody who had already. They used to come see me play when I used to go to DC. So there was a certain level of like, oh yeah, the kid, But so that memory from there, and then of course the dressing room had a grand piano in it, and that got kind of wrecked. And we also kind of uh, a uh, few things got destroyed during the filming of it. Like some monitors got kicked in, all like mostly accidental shit. But it was fucking great. Like they did not know that we were gonna participate in the performance. Uh, and they just kind of like the security like escorted us out, and we all just came like out like it looked like some like gladiator or some shit. All of a sudden, all these like bald headed dudes come fucking funneling out of this doorway and just like come out like a group of us. And then the fucking started playing, and we just fucking went ape shit. And the fucking security and everybody was like, they didn't know what the fuck was going on. They all started like jumping back, putting out their arms in front of the audience in their chairs, so like none of us would land on them and shit. Like it was hysterical, man. It was really great. I remember on our way there, also Devo was playing someplace like nearby in the neighborhood. So I remember me and all those DC guys. There was a fucking group of like 10 or 15 of us, right, walking down the street, which had to look a little scary because we were all like shaved heads. Most of them had like trench coats on and combat boots, chains around their waists and shit. And we bumped into some Devo guys, like some fans with the fucking Devo flower hats on, and like and it was really kind of just innocent and goofy. We didn't beat them up or anything. My friends, we would have beat them up, but these guys, the DC guys, were a lot nicer than the New York guys. And we just like kind of surrounded them and just were like, "Oh, nice hats!" And it was just, I just never forget the look on these fucking three Devo hat wearing guys. They were just like, "Oh fuck!" Like they looked like they were about to get like stomped out by the Ford and Baldies. It was just another one of those. I wish I had a camera in my branch. It was like three guys in Devo hats surrounded by like Ian MacKaye and Henry and me and all these motherfuckers and Sabre, and everybody's just like, it's like it was, it's funny shit, man.
Oh yeah, when Jimmy was
Oh, that would have been unbelievable.
yeah, I mean, when Jimmy from Murphy's Law was on the show, he said that after the show, him and Lefty went out and egged Devo fans. So,
Could be.
do you have any memories of Lefty from DC?
Oh, of course. Yeah,
Rest
she
in peace.
just passed away not that long ago. Yeah, she was fucking crazy, man. Yeah, yeah.
Better left unsaid.
That's all I got to say about that.
Yeah, we can leave that completely unsaid. I
Mhm.
guess the other band I want to talk to you about, because this actually was what our mutual friend Anthony Bourdain and I bonded over. What are your memories of the Dots?
Oh, well, Jimmy Quid, um, singer, was the producer of the first Bad Brains Pay to Come single, and they used to, him and the guitarist used to run a clothing store on St. Mark's Place called Defiant Pose, and it was directly across the street from Trash and Vaudeville. And they were like Trash and Vaudeville's big competition, because they used to like order a lot of stuff directly from seditionaries in London, which I believe was uh,
Vivian
Malcolm,
Westwood.
Vivian Westwood's clothes. So like it was like the only place where you could go and get like the terry cloth like destroy shirt and shit like that. And then they kind of made a switch in style and started selling more like Madonna looking type clothing and shit like that. But anyway, that's I'm just giving you some meaningless
That's all I.
history.
What
Yeah.
would this podcast be without meaningless information? Uh,
St.
I
Mark's Place was really fucking interesting back then. It was just all these freaky stores, man. Just like it was, everything was kind of geared towards punk, new wave. Like Manic Panic had their store right there, and of course Tish and Snooky. They have the hair color line. Manic Panic. They're like my aunts. I love those two. They started their store there. They're like fucking millionaires from their business that they started there with like $500 that they borrowed off their mom. God
yeah,
bless them.
yeah, they come up here on the show a lot, actually. Um,
Oh, Tish and Snooki? I thought
yeah,
you meant like, have they been on the show?
no, I should. I would love to have them on, but
Yeah,
like
they're fucking
anyone who's
cool.
from New York brings them up
I
as
mean,
being like
yeah,
key.
man, they were right there, man. They were, I used to hang out at their store all the fucking time.
Speaking of New York, I got to ask you one last question. Were you in Cattle Press or did you just produce the record?
What the fuck, dude? I don't know when I have met such a nerd. You get the nerd award, bro. No, I played with them. I didn't actually produce a record. I was the drummer for. I only did like, I want to say like 3 or 4 shows with them. They were fucking cool. A great band.
Great band.
I knew Joey Capizzi through jujitsu, and we both used to practice in the same building. And they needed a drummer for a few shows, and I started playing with them for a minute there. It's a lot of fun. Very interesting record that they put out. That full length has got some um, really cool songs on
Well,
it.
I could punish you with about more nerdy shit.
Man, what the fuck, dude? Any other weird rando shit?
I wanted to ask you about producing the Stigmata record, but
Oh, well, that was fun. That was, I believe, Jason Bittner's first album. Um, he always credits me with giving him some of the best advice as a producer ever. I remember telling him, because he's a fucking amazing drummer. He always was, but he was very young back then. And as you know, when you're young, you tend to show off a little bit. And I just remember telling him, dude, stop trying to fit 20 pounds of shit into a 10-pound bag. Less is more. You got to keep the songs together. Don't distract us from them. And he went from just doing like fucking nonstop fills to actually playing the songs and doing appropriate fills. Fucking great drummer. Great drummer. I mean, I didn't give him anything that he didn't already know. You know what I'm saying? I just said, dude, pull back, motherfucker. You got to live with this shit forever. You know? Great drummer. I
well,
was really fucked up when I was recording that record, by the way. But anyway, that's another story that no one
yeah,
knows about.
that's for part. That's for part two. We'll talk about that. We'll talk
Yeah,
about the In
I think
My
I was still
Eyes.
focused at that time. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about the In My Eyes tour, which there's a legendary story involving you that Tony Papalardo told when he was on the show.
What did I do?
You fought a whole show.
Oh, a whole club. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, yeah, I've done that. Yeah, yep. I have a few of those.
Well, anytime you want to talk about the good times, the bad times, or the ugly times, you're always welcome here, Harley.
Well, it was a pleasure talking to you, my brother, and this was definitely entertaining. And I hope for you, the listeners, that this was not just a boring fucking bunch of bullshit. But anyway, I enjoyed myself.